Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is a quick look at the bonsai and a summer trim where I think is necessary. This is my English beech. This is a slightly lopsided tree in as much as it has a gap here. But I do have two new growths coming out from the trunk. Now, if one of those can extend, I will get a new branch here. So that's hoping, of course. Very unusual for a beech, but I've got some secondary growth. Under normal circumstances, you only get one flush of growth on these in the spring when everything bursts into life, and that's your lot, and then until the next spring. But this one's pushing out a couple of secondary growths. Yeah, I don't think there's anything to do on this one as such. I mean, this branch is thickening up quite nicely. The new extensions in the spring worked okay. Got a dieback branch there, that can come off. It's probably been bashed with a watering can actually, come to think of it, which is a struggle at this time of year to keep these flipping things hydrated. Nonetheless, it's growing okay. Got some secondary growth here. These two branches are quite close together, and this one's a bit short. The idea with any bonsai tree that's an upright type is to get a conical shape, a nice even shape. So obviously wider at the bottom. You need some branches pointing slightly forward and some branches growing around the back, otherwise it ends up two-dimensional, flat. And this is a bit that way because it grew against a fence for part of its life, which messed it up a bit. But it's coming back, it's starting to get its shape back, but as you can see there's a real hole here. So if I can get these two little new growths to push out here, hopefully one can fill the back and one can come out sideways and just fill that gap up. Up at the apex here I've got quite a bit of secondary growth, and I plan on letting, I bet that's off camera, no, just about on. This growth here is going to be allowed to extend to take the trunk up a bit higher, because with a trunk this thick it could do with being about here, its overall size. So that's that one. As I say, there's nothing really to do on that this time of year. It'll get a spring trim again, and the spring trim is often nothing more than taking the lead bud out to push the secondary buds out sideways, otherwise you just end up with long skinny bits. So that's that one, English beech. I'll be back. Right, so this is one of my maples, and this is going mad at the moment. This has already had one trim this year, a couple of months back when I went to the revisited the Bonsai Society, which has basically fallen apart, so I won't be going back there. So this has already had one spring trim, well, late spring, early summer I suppose. With maples, if you want lots of back budding and thicken up your branches, they say prune in June, because that gives them time to react to the chopped off branches and push those buds out, and allows them to mature before autumn comes and they dump their leaves, and it allows the wood to harden a bit. So pruning at this time of year is not ideal, but this is just nothing more than a trim. This was grown from a seedling, you know, a stick in a pot as they say, and it's not a bad shape. This branch here is starting to get a bit high, so this is just a matter of taking the long extensions off, and that'll actually do for that. That's nothing more than that. This branch over here doesn't need anything done apart from a dead bit. That can come off. This is getting caught in the sun a little bit. They need some sun or you won't get the autumn colour. But the problem is, if they're not incredibly well hydrated, they will singe. This branch here, again, it's pushing up a little bit, getting a bit too high for its boots. This is a higher branch. This little branch down here I'm going to allow to grow, to get another little layer in there. It'll only be a small one, but the effect is the goal is to try and get a layering effect. I really need to have a go at the apex, basically. All these long extensions just need to come back. They're just getting out of hand, basically. I usually take them back either right off, back to the stump like that one, or back to the first pair of leaves, in which case they'll produce 2 new branches. Depends how well you've sort of got to the point so far. If you're trying to get a lot tighter branches, then sometimes it pays to take those long extensions right off, and other times you want to leave a bit to get 2 new branches. If you take them right off, that's it, the branch is gone. There's a few more on here. It's just a matter of keeping it in shape this time of year. It's no big deal. You know, again, you're looking for that type of shape. I'd like this to grow up a little bit, only a few more inches, but to allow it to do that's going to be difficult because the apex has gone in 3 directions, so I've lost my definitive trunk line, if you know what I mean. So all I can work with is the 3 apexes I've got, one of which is higher than the others. I think next spring I might actually lower this part because it's totally shadowing out the branch at the back, which has got some ridiculous extensions on. It's certainly gone mad, that one. Where's the first pair of buds? Actually, you need to go right back, and you can go back to 2. Actually, no. Yes, you can go back to 2. So again, it's just a summer trim to just keep it in shape. These long extensions are of no use. So if I leave them on now, a lot of the energy of the tree will go into them, and then come the spring, I'll cut them off. So there's, you know, you just have to sort of think through what's coming next. And what's coming next on this one will be its spring trim. So I'm just looking at, I would really love to get some wire on that branch and pull it down. But it would then leave a rather large gap. So I think it's going to have to stay as it is. What I'm hoping to do with this branch is thicken it at the base to level it and get a much deeper branch. This branch is okay. A little bit long in places, but not too bad. A long one lurking there. Another one there. No, that can stay. You can go back a bit. In actual fact, that's the better view, quite honestly, because it allows what was a back branch, looking at it from the other side, to be lower than this one, and that gives it a little bit more shape. Yeah, that'll do for that one. So it's just a little tidy up. And this is my other maple that I've grown from a seedling, and this is going mad. Boy, is this going to get a hack. Some people start at the top. I always start lower down, because I like to think of my conical shape starting from the base and going upwards. If I start at the top, sometimes I end up taking more off of the lower branches than I would have done otherwise. So I like to get my shape from the base upwards. Everybody has their own ideas. So again, this is just looking for long extensions and taking them back. Who knows, when I do my spring trim, they might get taken back further. But this is just to stop the shape getting out of hand and then ending up having to go mad in the spring, which can set the tree back a bit. That's great big long ones coming right off back there. What am I going to do here? So I've got a little layer forming there that I don't want to lose. So I'm just going to tuck that back a little bit, not a lot. That's there. That can be left. That's forming a little layer here, which this is getting a bit tall this side, so just take the height out of it. Make sure everything sticking up comes off, and then it'll push out sideways. This one's okay. That's still forming, so I'll get a good tidy up in the spring. Right, move into this one. We've got some whoppers sticking out the back here. They're all coming off. some lovely colour on some of these extensions. That's where they're getting a little bit more sun than really they ought to have. But if you put them in the shade, you tend to get larger leaves and a deeper colour. It's just whether that's what you want, really. I've just seen a couple more that are extending out a little bit farther than I would like. So say if you leave these extensions to grow, you only end up trimming them off again in the spring to get your shape back. And if the tree can be encouraged to push out some new buds by taking them off this time of year, then those are the new little branches you work with in the spring. See, this extension here has already been cut this year, and it's extended again beyond where I want, so I'm taking that back quite hard. Again, here and here. A lot of these extensions are pushing out, and they're 2 inches long before the first pair of leaves, which doesn't make them an ideal branch to keep. So some of them just come right off. What are we doing there? As I said, this isn't a complete shaping prune. That gets done in the spring. And I think that will do. See how the light is affecting that tree? See, from that side you've got a job to see any greenery at all. But that is the back of the tree effectively, and it's very bare. It really could have done with, it could do with coming this way a bit more. What's happening with this is where it is, it's got deep shadow behind it, which is underneath the staging effectively. It could do with coming out into more even light where it gets light from all sides, but to do that it's going to get sun all day, which probably won't do it any good, or certainly with the heat we're having now. So that'll do for that one. As I said, it's definitely got a front view where the leaves are angled towards the light away from the dark. That's easily solved by turning it the other way round every now and again. So what this tree needs doing is every week or so just turn it round the other way. But how I grow my trees at the moment, the place I keep them is quite linear because it's quite a narrow shelf. So they do tend to grow that way and not that way. But yeah, that'll do for that one. Quick trim. I'm not sure I've ever filmed this one because the plan was to actually give this away in the spring, as the I was hoping to give it away before the buds started to break so that whoever had it could repot it at the right time. But then I sort of changed my mind. You know, a twin trunk is not that easy to come across. I've had it quite a long time, desperately needs repotting. I didn't do it because I thought I was going to give it away and it was somebody else's job. This is a Japanese elm, and these are a pain to try and keep tidy because their extensions are fast growing, and this one over the years got well out of hand. This again has already had one trim this year, but the goal with a twin trunk is to keep the gap open so that you can see that it's a twin trunk, and you can guarantee that with one of these the best growths will be heading into that gap instead of sticking out sideways. Also, if you let those extensions grow on this, the leaves will become enormous very quickly. It's a vigorous grower, this thing. And what I'm trying to do here is create a new apex on this, because this was really badly cut off at some point before I got it. And it has no apex on the smaller growth. It just hangs out, and it needs a lot more branches in this area. Again, with a twin trunk, the overall shape should be that sort of dome, so I need quite a bit of width here to balance the tree from that side. I probably took over half the branches off of the trunk on this in the spring, and it's the idea being that those that are left will form the layers. But it's going to take time with this one, but it won't take as long as some other types of trees because it's a vigorous grower. And it's just a matter of not letting these extensions get too long. If you take the ends off, they will branch. And the more twiglets you get, the better the appearance. The apex on this I need to take control of, because this is the bit, these are very apical dominant, I think is the expression. In other words, it will put its best efforts into sticking the growth to the top of the tree and extend skywards, which is not always what you want. Some of these extensions around here are getting quite large leaves compared with the rest. Again, this is nothing more than keeping this from going mad, which it will do very quickly. It's not going to do it that well this year because, as I say, it desperately needs repotting, so it's probably got a pot full of roots crammed in, hardly any media left. I need width there, both sides. So this side, this smaller trunk needs to be allowed to push out, yeah? And where I've got long branches like this, away from the trunk, if I can't get that to bud back, then that branch will just be taken off. It'll start another one. These grow like mad, these things. So it's the same again down here. These extensions are starting to get long. If I don't push them back now, then in next year when I come to prune it, all the growth will be out here and this will be bare. So it pays to keep on top of these, it really does. That's about all I'm going to do. Oh, hang on, we've got a couple of biggies here. It's just a clip. Just take the ends off. When you take the end off, it will push out sideways, and that thickens it up. So that's about all I'm going to do on that. Something or other serrata, that's called, because of the serrated edges to the leaves. Yeah, another probably only a year or two, and I'll have a good tree there. Because it's a vigorous grower. So that's that one. Now, this is my English Hornbeam, probably the bonsai with one of the best trunks. It's got good form, it's got shape to it, but due to the period of bad neglect, it got badly out of shape. I'm recovering it slowly but surely, and this tree, for the size of this trunk here, is not tall enough. So I'm hoping somewhere up in that apex is a branch that I can make an extension of the trunk, because I'd like another probably 6 to 9 inches on top of this tree. I literally want it like that, yeah, rather than like that. At the moment it's squat. It needs more height to balance its width, if you know what I mean. And this has already had one prune this year, so it's getting very little now. It tends to be one of those that, again, like the beech, pushes out its new growths. Now I've got a large branch sticking out here that's died back completely, so there's no point in leaving it there. So we'll take that one right off, back there. No point in leaving a dead bit, it serves no purpose. So as far as the shape's concerned, that's good. I got a branch to fill that gap, yeah? So that can be left to grow out a bit more. Some of these can just have their ends clipped, nothing much. I don't want to take the energy out of this tree at this time of year. I'd rather it put the energy into growing, and we'll worry about shaping come next year in the spring. I've got some crossing branches up here, that's a no-no. What else I think I'm going to do with that? Have a look and see what we've got up the top of the tree. What have we got that could be allowed to grow up? Obviously got this one. At the moment that looks like it. This is not good because that's not really in an ideal place to allow to grow up. I might have to wait another year. See if I can get one to really force its way upwards instead of out sideways. So at the moment I'm not going to get what I want, I don't think. That's the only candidate to extend the trunk. I'll leave it there. If that is going to be the choice, come the spring, that will probably have to be wired to get it to stay upright. I don't normally wire my bonsai, but to create overall shape for a longer term future, sometimes you just have to. If that branch is left, it will arch. So all I would do is just put a small amount of wire to put it upright like that, and then in the spring allow it to grow, and then part way through the year take the top out and it'll branch, and then I can choose a couple of branches off of that, what looks like a tiny little twig at the moment, to reform a new apex. So sticky up one there, we don't want you. That's all I'm going to do on this. This one suffers, last year and this year, they are notoriously difficult to hydrate. Where they grow in the wild, they tend to be in damper areas, you know, where the lower levels of the soil just don't dry out. And obviously in a pot, even though it's a deeper pot for a bonsai, it dries, and they are really slow to hydrate. So if that goes completely dry or anything, it will affect. I mean, I've already got a little bit of sunburn on some of the leaves. It's also one of the first ones to drop its leaves in the autumn, and I think that's part and parcel of the fact that it just can't support its leaf cover unless it's deep rooted in a damper area, in which case they grow into beautiful specimens in the wild. That's all that one's going to get then, and we'll see if that can become a new trunk. You know, 10 years time that might look something decent. So that's that one. Right, so this is the biggie. This is my Acer palmatum Dishojo. This time of year they often they don't look at their best, because the brilliant scarlet, this type of colour, which is the spring colour, which lasts a fair amount of time, is absolutely stunning. But then as the season goes on, that red turns to green, and not all of it turns to green, so you end up with this halfway house between green and purple, and it can just look a bit muddy in the summer months. But stunning autumn colours on this one when we get there, but not yet. But we can't have things like this. Yeah, it's since it was repotted, it's got a bit vigorous, shall we say. This is a lovely layer on this branch. There's a couple of tall bits need to come off, but nothing to do there, that's fine. And I've got a couple of shoots a bit farther back, so I'd like this to thicken up a bit here where it's a bit bare, but you can only hope. That's that one. Let's get rid of these silly long bits. Can't see the wood for the trees, or the tree in this case. What's going on this branch? This was a failing branch that is now shooting out, so I don't want to do too much with that, but we'll have those two while we're there. Moving around to this very weak lower branch. It's always been a weak branch, this one, it just won't go. And as such, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to, you know, the more leaves it's got, the more it will draw the sap. Now, okay, that might mean I'll get some longer extensions by the end of the year, but it should strengthen the branch. Then I can worry about reshaping it when we get to the spring. This branch here could do with being there. Again, that could be, have a little piece of wire hooked over it that then just goes around the bottom of the pot for a while, just to hold it in place. You've got to go very careful if you put wire on a maple, because it will scar it, and in some cases those scars will never go. They'll stay there for the life of the tree and spoil it. So you've got to go careful. Very loose wiring if you're going to actually wire a maple. See, now this extension here, that long, is still growing as well. Back at the base of that extension are several good points that looks like they're already thinking about branching. So by getting that now, that should start its new branching effort from the lower leaf areas this year. Then I'll have something to work with in the spring. No, I'm going to leave that weak branch. I'm just going to let it go. The dead bit there, that can come off. No point in leaving that. Yeah, I'll need to do a bit of separation in the spring. But again, this one's coming back from the brink. See, this extension here has already branched lower down. It's already got a branch heading off in two directions, so that's already working. As is that one. So it's just a tidy up. This branch has got a lovely layer on it. It will be emphasised better with some of this removed, but at the moment, as I said, I'm trying to bring this plant back into shape from the years of neglect that all the bonsai got, so that's probably all I'm going to do. I just wanted those huge extensions off because I know they're going to come off in the spring anyway. They just will come off now, and then hopefully they'll have already bushed up a bit by the time we get to the spring. I still have trouble making my mind up on this, which is the front and which is the back. I mean, this branch looks best from this side, yeah, because it lowers itself nicely. It looks like a nice layer. But then this bit looks a bit bare. But I can be working on this. You know, this awkward shaped thing here is pushing out in that direction mainly, but it has got quite a sturdy branch here that died back badly, but it is now growing again. So if this can be encouraged to grow and fill this space, that might be a better view of the tree. But at the moment, the best view is probably from that side. I don't know though. I think I might hit this hard and bring this one right back in. I know it sounds like a snap decision, but it's method in my madness. Panic not. I'm just going to hit that branch quite hard. And just basically reduce its vigour by taking a lot of its leaves off. The leaves obviously feed the tree, and the more leaves there are on a branch, the more it will draw the sap, the more it will grow. It's like a never, you know, a self-perpetuating mechanism. So by reducing that one down, maybe we have got a better view from this side. We need to do something with that perhaps. I'll work on it, I'll think on it. Some bonsai trees spend 20 years growing with the best view, and then somebody suddenly looks at the view from the other side and actually decides that's the better view. And things change over time, you know. That's certainly the nicest view of the trunk with the branching out. That's certainly a nicer base, but with this big gap here it doesn't work. But look at the new growth I've got in this area. If I work on that next year and get myself a nice layer here, I think I've got a much better view to that one. Anyway, that's all that needs doing today. Oh, just a couple up here that are heading skywards. Yeah, it's getting a bit long out there as well. Yeah, that'll do, I think. Now, is that what I think it is? Yeah. No, it's not. It's a little spider nest, I think. I thought that was scale. Yeah, so that'll do for that one. Let's put that back. This weighs a ton, this thing. And last but not least is my conifer, my pine. And I am well pleased with the amount of growth I've got on this year. This was a shame that this ever got out of shape. Because on a pine, once you get spindly long branches, it's difficult to push them back. Because in some cases they're reluctant to back bud. But this one has, I spotted a real dead bit, you can come off. But all of the growth extensions this year have pushed on nicely. It's bushing up at long last. So for this year, all of those are going to be allowed to grow. Some were pruned in the spring to try and encourage back budding, and I have got some. I've got some in some interesting places, like here. I've got a couple of little buds pushing back here, and it's that branch that needs to thicken up, and it looks like it's playing ball. Dead bit. There's a little new growth here, and here. So this is doing its thing, but I daren't prune it now. Obviously, with a conifer, the needles are its leaves, so that's where the photosynthesis takes place and creates all the sugars and energy for the plant. So It needs to be left this year. It needs to get some strength back into the tree, which it looks like it's doing quite nicely. This area over here is wrong. I've attempted to get two branches, two layers going here, but I'm not sure I'm ever going to achieve it. I'm going to cheat. I'll tuck that in there. That looks better already, doesn't it? But it's a weak branch, a weak section of a weak branch. This one here has got a couple of new little growths farther down, so that's trying. And up on this bit here I've got 5. Why am I bleeding? Oh, I don't know. Something got me. But this is a weak area that's now trying. These new growths, I mean, if you look at an apical growth up there like that, if that's still on the camera probably, compared with this is weak. And the way to get some strength into here is to let it grow, not keep cutting it back. I could hack this now, but what I'm going to do is wait until well into the autumn. There'll come a time when some of these older needles will drop soon, in fact, which makes it look even more leggy because it's the oldest needles that go, 2 to 3 year olds I think. But then all of these really long extensions can be cut back, and that can be shaped nicely. Yeah, but by doing it in the autumn, pines don't stop growing in the winter. They grow very slowly, they continue to grow, and if you take an extension off relatively near the base, it will during the winter produce 2 and sometimes 3 buds. If I leave these extensions and those 2 or 3 new buds form at the end, when the old needles drop, it's got leggy again. So it has to be kept in check, but the time of year is important. It will get a spring trim to relocate energy. What you do is look at where the dominant energy areas are and hold them back so that the energy redisperses itself in amongst the rest of the tree. Now with a pine it's not so important. With something like a maple, in the autumn it pulls in all the energy from the leaves, all the chlorophyll and everything like that, and pulls it down into the tree and stores it for the winter, ready to push those new buds off. So it has a definitive amount of energy in it during the winter. Come the spring, the energy it's got goes into pushing the buds out, and at that point it's got negative energy. It's used up nearly all of its energy to get those buds going, but it hasn't got any leaves yet, so it can't photosynthesize. So it's in a negative state. You don't tend to get that with a pine because it's always got some needles, so it's not quite so dramatic. But negative energy on a tree has to be catered for. You have to wait for the leaves to mature, because the young leaves, the young tender leaves, don't actually photosynthesize very well at all. And once they mature they do, and the energy comes back into the tree to replace what it lost to get going in the spring. Not so much of a big deal with a conifer. Anyway, I'm not touching that, I just wanted to show it. This one only has one view, because without that, I'll show you. If you turn that sideways, yeah, that trunk is much wider than it is deep because of the damage that was done to it. And the same down here, the base doesn't look anywhere near as good. It's only got one view. It can only have one view. There's no point in ever thinking about turning that the other way around, because it'll just look wrong. And you know, look, it's narrower here than it is here, from that side, from that angle, and then it gets even wider. So that can never be its view. It's always got to be this way round. That's how it was decided to be. And then from that view, you know, you can see that the trunk narrows to a degree, or certainly better than it does from the other view. And the idea with this one is to get a nice dome on the top that slopes away. The idea is that it's been weathered on the mountainside, and all the weather's hit it hard, so it's grown away from that weather and just left this little bit hanging on. I like that tree quite a lot, and it's going to take some time to get this back to make it really good again, but it's getting there now. This is the first year I think I can look at the growth on that and say I'm actually happy now. Next year I'll have plenty to work with. It's back budded in a lot of places. I've got some good extensions. Take them back in the autumn, get lots more tight new buds, certainly in this area. A lot of the energy will be taken out of that come the autumn time, and then we'll see what we start with next spring and go from there. But it's coming on. Probably my favourite. Well, actually the Deshojo and this one are my two favourites. But yeah. Right, that's a quick look at the bonsai, and see you next time. Bye for now.